Let me read to you a passage from the 10th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 16 to 23. It's the Gospel for Friday of the 14th week in Ordinary Time. St. Matthew writes, Jesus said to his apostles, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be on your guard against men. They will hand you over to the local councils and flog you in their synagogues. On my account, you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time, you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. All men will hate you because of me, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. I tell you the truth, you will not finish going through the cities of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That's from Matthew chapter 10, verses 16 to 23. It speaks of following Christ. What do I mean? Well, there are, of course, instances in the Old Testament of prophets who had disciples. We can expect that over the long course of Old Testament religion, numerous religious teachers had disciples. Isaiah speaks of his disciples. We read, bind up the testimony and seal up the law among my disciples, in Isaiah chapter 8 verse 16. Rabbinical Judaism made much of the concept of discipleship. The advice of a pre-Christian writer was, take to yourself a teacher and acquire a companion. Classical philosophers had their disciples, their students, as did Jewish rabbis. The scholar R.T. France has written that, and I quote, every Jewish teacher worth his salt had his circle of disciples who followed him, literally walking behind him as he rode or walked ahead, looked after his daily needs and soaked up his teaching. Their teacher was the most important person in their lives. In his book, published 1976, page 50. There were, though, some notable differences between the idea of discipleship in Christ's practice and that of the Greek teacher or Jewish rabbi. While commonly the disciple chose his master, Christ chose his disciples, and he commanded his disciples to make other disciples, indeed to make disciples of all the nations. Most notably, in common practice, one's choice of a master was the choice of a teacher in order to gain knowledge, but in the case of Christ, being his disciple involved not only this, but principally it involved and required an ardent love for and indeed worship of his very person. It was essentially a profound, personal and definitive relationship of love unto death. You did not move on to another teacher once you gained the best that Jesus Christ had to offer. There was no other teacher apart from him, and anyhow, it was principally a matter of friendship issuing in obedience. The disciple of Christ was called to follow him to the end, and that end was the cross in some form. After insisting 3 times with Simon Peter that he loved him more than the others, Christ's final words to him were, follow me, John chapter 21. It would never have occurred to Aristotle to ask this of his students, say Alexander, or the students of his school in Athens, nor Isaiah to ask such a thing of his disciples. But Christ asked his disciples that they sacrifice everything for love of him and for his revelation. Now this was unique. There is a further distinguishing point about Jesus Christ. He not only had disciples, but apostles. Apostolos means one who is sent forth, dispatched. In other words, one who is entrusted with a mission, especially a foreign mission. It has, however, a stronger sense than a mere messenger. It means an envoy, a delegate, an ambassador. In the classical writers, the word is not all that frequent. In the Greek version of the Old Testament, it occurs rarely. In the New Testament, however, it occurs frequently and denotes some disciples who are called to a specific role as legates of the Messiah, who had come to establish God's kingdom and to extend it to all the nations. Now, there was nothing like this in Old Testament religion. Christ's mission was to establish God's promised kingdom on the earth, and he instituted the means of entering it. That means would be his church, built on the 12, and specifically on the one he designated as the rock, Simon Peter. The keys to the kingdom were entrusted to him. Whatever he bound on earth would be ratified in heaven. By entering this church and partaking of its life, one would enter God's kingdom, which was nothing other than union with Jesus Christ and living by his divine life. Not only had Christ apostles, but he sent them out with specific expectations and resources. The expectation was that they would suffer persecution, and their great resource would be the Spirit of the Father. He promised that, and I quote, "They will hand you over to the local councils and flog you in their synagogues. On my account you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles." They did not have much to look forward to in terms of reception. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. All men will hate you because of me. That is to say, their path would be that of their master. But they need not worry about how to bear witness in these circumstances. Do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Matthew chapter 10, verse 16 to 23. The Church makes it clear in her teaching to all of Christ's faithful that in all of this, each baptized person has a share. In both discipleship, the business of learning from the Master, and in apostleship, the business of making disciples of all others, each baptized person is called by God to participate by vocation. All are called to holiness of life, and this essentially means following Jesus Christ. We are called to love him with all our heart, for he is God the Son, made man, and our Redeemer. We are called to accept his teaching in full faith, and we are called to share in his mission of making disciples of all the nations. Let us be up and doing then.